Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon,
Hello.
or good evening, wherever you are. I'm very pleased to start today this webinar, and I have the privilege to have important guests with us. I'm João Bosco Monte, the president of the Brazil-Africa Institute, and I have with me Professor Sarah Agbor. She's the Commissioner for Human Resources, Science and Technology for the African Union Commission. Hello, Professor Sarah. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Very
Hello,
good.
can you hear me?
I can hear you very well. Thank you once again to have you with us.
It's a pleasure.
All right. I have also Dr. Issa Sanogo. He's the director of Regional Center for the World Food Program Against Hunger and Malnutrition. Hello, Dr. Sanogo. Very good to have you with us.
Hello everyone. Good to be here.
Thank you. And also I have the privilege to receive today Mr. Carlos Watson. He's the Senior Coordinator of the Office of South-South and Triangular Cooperation of FAO. Thanks again, Mr. Carlos, for your participation.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Very good. We have also the participation of a very important audience spread in many parts of the world. So please feel free to send your request, your information, or your question to the participants, and we will be very pleased to pass to them, and then they can answer your question. We are facing now a very important moment with this pandemic. Everywhere, everybody, in many places, we are trying to adjust ourselves in this situation. It's not easy. It's not possible for us to solve the problem in one single shot, and people in many parts in the world are trying to understand. And today we're going to talk about two important topics, which are combined. We have youth empowerment and the promotion of a rural community sustainability or development. How can we put together the two issues? Youth empowerment and also sustainability in rural communities. And I'm very pleased to receive three guests who are experts, and they will give us some, not recipes, but some experiences, some good practices, and some ideas that will give to the audience and even ourselves the opportunity to engage and to, when we leave this situation, we'll be more able to apply the information and the comments, the experience that we are facing in this day. So I start now with a question for the three of us, the four of us. I include myself in this discussion. How possible is to make agriculture attractive to young people, and how to keep them in rural areas? When you have rural areas, you have a dichotomy, rural and urban. People are leaving rural areas to urban areas. But how can we leave people or keep people, young people, in rural areas? I start this question. I'd like to listen your voice, Professor Sarah. I know you are involved with human resources and technology. I know that 5 minutes that you have now is not enough, but please try to give us an idea about this question, please.
Thank you very much. I was thinking Dr. Sanogo Issa will start off, FAO, since they're the experts on the team. But now I will speak from a layman perspective. Youth empowerment and promotion of rural communities. The youth, for example, in Africa, represent about 70% of our population. And that is what we refer to as our demographic asset. Because the youth of Africa, they are our demographic asset. And my department is the Department of Human Resources, Science and Technology. And under that department, we have education, science, technology, innovation, and youth and empowerment. And one of our functions is to build projects on human resource development, matters to promote science and technology. And we also encourage and provide technical support to member states in the implementation of policies and programs in this field. Now, the youth of Africa, we need to capacitate and empower them. And most often, We think that education should be the education from the classroom. It should be beyond that. Because what we need now is to think of business as unusual, not the usual kind of business, because the bulk of them are very much not employed. How do we get them to be employed? It is for this reason, and in the light of COVID, that we need to look for newer ways of empowering the youth of Africa. And that is where agripreneurship becomes very important. So for me, it is agripreneurship, redefining agriculture in a way that it will look, in quotes, sexy for the youth to get engaged in. But you know, when you talk about agriculture to that dimension, where do they get collaterals? Where do they get funding? Where do they get resources that they'll be able to go into agriculture and actually get into agriculture? Because the question you said is, how can we make agriculture attractive and keep them in rural areas? So if the rural areas, where we refer to as the rural areas, have basic amenities like electricity, like internet, and then they have basic amenities too, like good hospitals, etc., and then good accommodation, the youth of Africa will be able to stay within those places. Now, after that, how do we provide them with funding? Because we've used the right word, they are youth. Where do they get collaterals? So agencies need to come together. And this is so interesting for us because just 2 days ago, today is Friday, just on Wednesday, on Thursday, we had a meeting with the African Union Development Agency, AUDA Nepal, on 100,000 MSMEs, the SMEs that will promote. And agriculture is one of the pivots. And then AUDA Nepal will come in as a body that will help these kids get the financing from the banks, like EcoBank. So it was a meeting that brought together Afri-Exim Bank, EcoBank, and other banks together. And then we were discussing on how we can actually help the youth of Africa. And AUDA Nepal said they will stand as guarantors for these kids. So that is just one way that we can do it, to get them lands, you know, get lands in bigger proportion, divide the lands, cash crops, subsistence agriculture, etc. Put them into that and find a way they will do it. I think there is an organization in Uganda that is using the mobile phone in trying to encourage the youth of Africa into agriculture. And what do? They ask the youth that the youth themselves go to those rural areas because many people have access to mobile phones, and they help them to collect their goods and then sell it in town or in the cities. So to get the youth of Africa into agriculture and keep them in line with this, the strategy, the continental strategy, the science, technology, innovation story for Africa, where we talk about the recalibration of agriculture, recalibration of technologies, then we need to also put the financing. So for me, the first one is financing. The second one is creating consciousness among the youth of Africa on the advantage of going into agriculture, because if there's something we have as Africans, it is land. So we have land. And then getting private sector to get engaged with these kids, with these youth, so that they can work together in a team, as a team, in order to get the products that will help keep these kids together. So to be able to achieve the vision of Agenda 2063, which is that vision of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, to be integrated, to be peaceful, we must think about food. Food security is one. And if we know that we need to follow food security, then we must create avenues for the youth of Africa to get engaged into agriculture. And if they have to get engaged into agriculture, they need infrastructure, they need machineries, etc. How do they get them? The banks have to come in, and that is the part AUDA Nepal will be playing. When I use the word AUDA Nepal, it is the African Union Development Agency, Nepal, that has become AUDA Nepal, and they are saying that they are ready to train 100,000 youth SMEs on this aspect.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Sara, for your very important and straight message. Professor Sara, if you can just turn off your microphone now while you are not talking, it will be much better for you to participate. Only the microphone. Okay. Now, I come now to you, Dr. Issa Sanogo. The same question to you: how can we make agriculture attractive for young people. And Professor Sarah, she mentioned something very usual now with the word sexy. How can we bring agriculture in a perspective that is a sexy activity? And also, I'd like to mention to you, ask you to include in your approach now food security, please.
Thank you very much, Professor João. It's difficult after seeing Her Excellency having such a great pitch for the beginning, but let me try to follow her footsteps. I'm going to say that clearly, when we look at some of the challenges that the youth is facing, mostly in Africa, we are very much aware of the fact that the high unemployment rate is a concern, the underemployment rate is a concern, and also the skills mismatches. And from that perspective, clearly, as you said, if we wanted to look at it in terms of what that means, clearly those three things brings higher poverty, they bring higher food insecurity, they also bring insecurity. On top of that, they bring migration. If you look at the literature, it is very clear that most of the migrant people from African origin leave rural areas to migrate because of lack of job and business opportunities. And also, around 40% of them get involved in the rebel movements because of lack of job opportunities and businesses. So from that perspective, if you ask me today, what are the issues that the youth is facing? Professor mentioned some of them. I want to add, or let me echo what she said to start with, that the youth is challenged by the lack of access to financial, legal, credit services in the rural areas. That's one bit of the issue. The youth is also facing lack of economic infrastructure to start with that connect the produce, the agricultural production to the markets. The youth would be very much lucky to take advantage of the digital economy that is a must nowadays. And to me, the digital economy is providing a lot of opportunities, and I don't see the youth, especially in the rural areas, I don't see the youth being outside of it. The youth has to be part of it, because in most African countries, you have 80% of the jobs, be they formal or informal, they are mainly coming from the rural activities. And from that perspective, it is clear that if we wanted to make the rural areas attractive to the youth, we need to invest in digital infrastructure. If you look at it today, Africa is a place where, according to the World Economic Forum, where you have the highest penetration and the fast-growing mobile technologies, but the rural areas could still gain from having an improvement from that front. And I think for agriculture, or even for us to be able to make a critical impact on food security and agriculture today, we have a great opportunity to take advantage of digital economy. Look at the e-commerce, look at the e-agriculture, look at the data technology, which give opportunities to the farmers to be able to know the market opportunities, to get close to financial services, etc., etc. Those are the kind of things that we need to invest in rural areas to make agriculture sexy. And if we manage to do that, from a food security point of view, the digital economy is shortening distances. It is improving access to market. It is also improving production and productivity. So if you take all those aspects, such as the use of smart technologies to do irrigation, the use of smart technologies to manage soil and land and water facilities, all of that contribute to food security. So from that perspective, I think my key word here is to make agriculture sexy and make sure that the use of technologies impact food security. We have to invest in those technologies. And who better than the youth, who is more literate, because that's not about going to school. It's about digital literacy. And the youth is way ahead of us, the senior, in that domain. And we must tap into it. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Issa, I really appreciate what you have said. Technology now is a very important tool, definitely. We are now in 4 different places. I'm in Brazil. Dr. Issa, where you are now? Where are you now? No, you're mute?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
I'm in Côte d'Ivoire, Abidjan.
Côte d'Ivoire, Abidjan, okay, turn off your mic. Professor Sarah, where are you now, please?
Ethiopia.
You are in Ethiopia. Addis Ababa, thank you. Turn off your mic. And Carlos, where are you now?
No.
Carlos, where?
Rome.
Rome, okay.
In Rome, Roma.
This exercise is just to say that we are now using technology very easy. It will be impossible to understand that a few years ago, we could have people in different parts of the world, different time zones, talking live, remotely, and bringing some good experiences. So technology, digital inclusion is very important. I come to you now, Carlos. At FAO, I know FAO have some activities with inclusion, digital inclusion, but related to the area where you are now, South-South cooperation, triangular cooperation, I'd like to address to you, what is the importance of digital technology or digital infrastructure, and what good experiences that you can bring to us in your area of expertise? No, you are mute. Carlos, your mic is mute. Carlos? Carlos, please turn off. Okay, yeah. Now I can hear you.
Is that okay now? Okay, sorry about that. No, first of all, I'd like to thank my 2 predecessors. They gave a very, very comprehensive picture of what's going on, both in terms of challenges, in terms also of how to make it agriculture attractive and rural entrepreneurship attractive to the young. I'm going to dwell a little bit more into that part of the aspect of the technology part, and definitely we have some experiences to share in FAO. And as our Director General said in a few weeks back in a forum, technology and digital technology especially is the key of the future. Is the key of the future. Let me just try to find out his exact quote, which I have it around here somewhere. There we go. The role of technology in promoting sustainable rural communities, as said by our Director General earlier this year in the Forum Global for Food and Agriculture, technology, more precisely digital technology, can play a critical role in feeding a growing global population and promoting agricultural development, especially in rural development in the next decade. The use and application of digital technologies to agriculture has become an important driving force of rural transformation, creating new opportunities for farmers. In order to promote sustainable rural communities, we need to foster knowledge and technology exchanges, as well as capacity development. All of these can be done effectively through South-South and triangular cooperation. Digital technologies offer a unique opportunity for helping to increase agricultural production and productivity, while promoting efficient use of resources. Digitalization can also boost livelihoods and improve the living conditions of people, particularly farmers in rural areas. With this, we are effectively promoting the eradication of poverty, which is SDG 1, and SDG 2 as well, zero hunger, accelerating progress towards the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Bringing technology to the rural communities can support us in accelerating progress towards achieving the SDG. We have to keep in mind that we have only 1 decade left to go, so we all have to get our act together and act accordingly, revise even the way we do business today, the way our business models are being performed, because the time is running out. One example of cutting edge technology that we are promoting in FAO is a mobile app that we have developed together with a partner from academia, which is for the control of the fall armyworm. This mobile app, which has a funny name, FAMUSE, is fall or armyworm monitoring an early warning system. It's cutting edge. It is innovative app. It's helping farmers and extension officers to collect and record information when checking their farms for the pest infestation. This is a farmer-to-farmer SSC component, as the data is being collected by the people in the field to the people in the field. Our Office of South and Triangular Cooperation and FAO is actively promoting webinars for training on the use of the app jointly with the responsible unit, of course, in FAO. We're also now engaging in a new initiative under the umbrella of the FAO China South-South Cooperation project, also on the fall armyworm, that will take also of these innovative technologies to increase resilience of rural farmers in pest by using mobile app. On that, I would like to highlight the importance of capacity development and training. I think Professor already mentioned the importance of this. Technology is needed, but we also need to provide training for rural communities and farmers to adapt technology into the fields. And as my dear colleague Issa mentioned, I mean, youngsters are in the best position to do so, as they are computer literates. Thank you very much.
All right, Carlos, thank you for your approach. I will come to you with some activities that FAO is delivering in where FAO is located. So stay with us. Professor Sara, okay, please turn off your mic, Carlos. Professor Sara, you are the women in the room, so the voice of the women many times are more stronger than the voice of the men, right? And we don't see too much. We don't see too much the participation of girls in this discussion. And gender, for me, specifically, it's very important. We have one activity at the Institute, which is the YTTP, Youth Technical Training Program. Every year we bring young Africans to receive training in Brazil, in areas that Brazil is doing well, especially agriculture. And one of the criteria that I put very straight is to have gender balance. We receive a group of 10 people, we need to have 5 and 5. If the group is 20, it will be 10 and 10. So gender balance is very important. And rural community, rural women and girls across the world sometimes are not so, doesn't receive the importance. And I quote the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He said in 2019, last October, that rural women and girls across the world are powerful force in global action to respond to climate change, according to the statistics. So what is the role of the African Union? What efforts, Professor Sara, that the African Union is doing to bring to the discussion, to empower girls in the agriculture sector?
Thank you very much, John. In the African Union, we promote gender parity. For example, the African Union Commission is gender balanced. We have 5 commissioners that are female and 5 that are men. So there's gender parity. And in the African Union, we also have the Gender Directorate that looks into the question of equity and gender balance. And out of the Gender Directorate, in each of the departments, there's a consciousness that we must bring women to the forefront to change the paradigm on the way we work. So in the African Union, there's also the Centre International pour l'Éducation des Femmes et Filles. That is the International Center for the Education of Women and Girls. And this is very, very important, particularly because we call it the AU CFR that is hosted in Ouagadougou, where we talk about the rural women, girls. It is very essential because we realize that the bulk of our African population are in the rural area. And today you are talking about agriculture. If my colleague, the Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture, was part of this, and I think you should invite her next time, she will give you the data, the statistics. But we have agreed together with that Department of Rural Economy and Agriculture to promote agripreneurship, because agripreneurship is the way forward in the empowerment of women and girls. Because many of our women in the rural area are into agriculture already. They might not do it in a broad base, but they are already into culture, buying and selling of their food products or the food basket that they have. So also in our meetings, in our STCESC, that is the Specialized Technical Committee on Education, Science, Technology, with Education, Science, and Technology, we also spoke about the issue of gender balance. And that issue also is promoted because the African Commission is a secretariat. And what do? We remind member states of decisions that they have taken over the years. For example, there was a workshop we had one time where we talk about the monitoring, the implementation of legal and institutional frameworks on girls and women's education on the margin of the 6th PAP meeting. All these meetings is that if you do not give or empower the girls or the women, then definitely 52% of our population, they are women. So we cannot do away with them. So the African Union have different policies and strategies to support the African women or the African girls, particularly through the specialized technical committees on education, science, and technology, through the even when you talk about the Department of Rural Economy and Agriculture and the Department of Social Affairs, particularly because in the Department of Social Affairs, where we have Commissioner Mira, they take care of these women, these rural women and the rural girls, and making sure that member states take those policies and drive them home back to their states. Because we don't execute, we don't implement. It is the member states that implement. And organizations like FAO actually assist us in member states to make sure that some of these aspects are seen. Organizations like UNICEF, like UNESCO, there are different organizations that actually push the training of women. Because when Carlos was speaking, he emphasized on one very important aspect, and that is the training of people. Because if you do not train them, you know, recently the Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture, they created a museum in Ouagadougou, where they said women will no longer use the local hoe. They put it in the museum, that they are now going into the technology phase of it, where they will teach them on how to use these different machineries. So the role of AU is to bring awareness to member states and to put in different policies and strategies that will promote the empowerment of the rural community, particularly our rural women and our girls.
Okay, Professor Sarah, thank you. You raised so many issues. We could have another webinar for 2 more hours to discuss things that you mentioned, and I'm very pleased that you mentioned. I'd like to say that we have participation from Brazil, of course, from Côte d'Ivoire, from Kenya, from Togo, from Ethiopia, from DRC Congo, from Portugal. So as we are talking, we are receiving some questions. There is one question that brings me some discussion, and sometimes I'm very worried about this, and I hope you'll be worried as well as I am. Someone from Ethiopia is saying that a large number of people that cannot read or write. So people who doesn't have capacity or capability to read and write. How could you combine digital literacy to this community? Please don't answer this now. Let's leave for later. I will combine with something else. But Professor Sarah, she mentioned something at the beginning of her discussion. She mentioned about funding. Dr. Issa Sanogo, if people doesn't have money to produce, if they don't have fund, how possible it will be easy for the agripreneurs, the word that Professor Sarah mentioned before, she insisted, how this could be possible without money, without funding. NEPAD is now working this 100,000 SMEs, bringing some help, some financial support without money. My idea is that we cannot go very far. So in the World Food Program, in your capacity as director of the Center to eradicate hunger, and hunger is something that cannot wait. How can we eradicate hunger? How can we produce? But how can we bring attention to the kids, to the young people, if they don't have money, don't have funds? Please.
Can you hear me? Thank you. And a very challenging question, but clearly, Professor, Her Excellency Sarah mentioned it at the beginning of her statement. Financing, I also mentioned it as one of the key challenges. And it's clear that in the rural areas, a key challenge is limited access to financial means and limited access to credit. That said, again, when we look at the development of the mobile technologies, these are providing easy ways of getting finance closer to the rural areas. In WFP, one of the things, as you know, WFP is involved in many areas in the rural transformation. One key expertise area is, for instance, the technical support that WFP provides in the e-commerce and throughout the supply chain to make sure that the support is bringing the farmers closer to the markets. And that is being done either by tapping into the technical experience or by giving also technologies accessible. Let me give you a couple of examples. The e-commerce, for instance, I'll give an example. We have a base in Kenya, which is about farmers' access to market. It's a project which is multi-country. What that brings is not only the technical capacity, not only the demand side, but also the financing side, because it's public-private entrepreneurship that are brought together to make sure that all the services are put together to cater for the needs of the smallholder farmers. The other thing that I can mention is that on the technology side, WFP has got that capacity of doing the last mile where there is no financial services. There is a platform, I can call it the Scope platform, which is really an electronic platform which enables the remote areas, in case there is no financial mechanism at all, to use that platform to be able to do transfer, money transfer in places where the private sector or the private mobile companies would not go because it's just too expensive. I'll give another example, which is around building capacities in rural asset creation. And that most of the time is combined with sovereign insurance and also insurance for smallholder farmers. If you get insurance to smallholder farmers, or sovereign insurance to farmers, you are very likely to leverage that insurance for additional financing. So those are some of the things that WFP does to really attract or to facilitate the financing of smallholder farmers in rural areas. Now, just to build very quickly on your previous question, from the gender perspective, I just wanted to say that when you take gender and youth empowerment and you link it to the rural areas, you realize that 80% of the production is coming from the smallholder farmers. And you will notice that those smallholder farmers are women and the youth. So having that bulk between the youth and the women makes that segment of the population a priority in terms of financing. In Surfarm, what we do in that case, we are trying to look at the gender aspect and the youth empowerment aspect through the transfer of the transfer of knowledge, mobilizing experts, so that we can tag the youth to the senior experts when we promote South-South cooperation or we deploy missions for technical assistance. That's our way of contributing to the promotion of youth opportunities. Over to you.
Thanks, my brother Issa. I think you raised many important topics, and I will come to you, Carlos, now. You mentioned, Issa, about the importance of young people in the production, and you gave a number, 80% in rural areas. It's very big. Carlos, Professor Sara mentioned something about funding. Issa mentioned something about the empowerment of girls. But there is one aspect I'd like to address to you, which is political engagement. So we have the countries, the policies that we have discussed in offices. But what about the role of the private sector? At the end of the day, the private sector is the one who turns the wheel, that moves the wheel. So without the participation of the private sector, we cannot go very far. And how can we bring building capacity and also insurance, something that Issa mentioned? So what do you think that the private sector can contribute to emphasize and bring more attention to the participation of young people in the agriculture sector?
Yeah, thank you very much. Indeed, private sector is key for bringing the results into the rural communities. I mean, we need the private sector participation, but that private sector, I mean, the whole range of the private sector, from the large companies to the smallholder farmers. So, in that respect, I'd like actually to use an example of how we are working with the young people to make them more able to access this type of financing that is my colleagues have just described, and is basically one of the major limitants for young farmers. Regarding, and this is actually it's a very important FAUST program and experience that brings successful activities in promoting youth agri-entrepreneurship and sustainable and resilient food systems. Good examples, and one of them is the junior farmers field schools and life schools. It's a chronic youth underemployment, and its derived impact in livelihoods can be attributed partly to young limited access to the right training opportunities. To address this challenge, FAO has developed the junior farmers fields and life schools. When young people succeed, they drive economic growth and invest more back into their families and communities. This is why this program has aimed to achieve and is achieving. The method aims to teach young people about agricultural business topics and capabilities, linking it with more general life lessons and skills. Through it, we can learn more sustainable techniques, stemming from how to protect their crops from diseases or changes in climate. This knowledge can be applied to protect them from other adverse conditions. The project was pilot in Mozambique in 2003, and now is creating entrepreneurships in 20 countries in Africa and the Middle East, with 25,000 young women and men participating in the program. Food security in most of these households receiving training has improved, and poverty rate has dropped. I'm making a case for the small, medium, and micro enterprise, which I consider also to be private sector. The methodology that I was mentioning is highly versatile. As I said, was first introduced in Mozambique in 2003, but then in 2006 was adopted also in Kenya and Uganda for internally displaced people. Then the solution was sent to Sudan and to the West Gaza and Bank. I'm trying to highlight these issues because this is also how South-South and triangular cooperation works. Making successful initiatives that had given good results in one place, adapted and transported into another place to try to achieve similar results. One of the key results of this unique learning methodology and curriculum is that teaches agricultural life and entrepreneurial skills by practicing them into an approach uniquely suited to rural communities and to individuals with very low literacy rates, which was one of the comments of one of my previous colleagues. Regarding the potential for scaling up, the program holds huge potential to be adapted to many countries and assessed according to context. That depends what is the specific context of a country, and we can adapt it to that specific country. The fact that the method has been adapted to different cultures and climates, that means that it can be applied in diverse socio-economical contexts. This is a method that could be replicated as a useful mechanism in conflict zone, conflict areas, post-conflict areas, and transition economies. This is creating very young, vibrant entrepreneurs, which is, for me, a little bit what we need in the private sector as well. Thank you very much.
Carlos, I like very much the figures that you gave, but sometimes I'm very pragmatic in terms of results. Sometimes when we are involved in this, Carlos, please turn off your mic, please, Carlos.
Yes, sorry about that.
Okay. Sometimes when we are in the development world, we have so many projects that we have in our offices, right? In a very comfortable place, air conditioner. So, and sometimes we don't understand when we go to the field. Sometimes the project that we have during the discussion in our office, sometimes the project doesn't bring practical result. So I'd like to know more, Carlos, about these activities that FAO is doing. Maybe in the moment it's not so free for us to have this conversation, but I think you can share with us and even giving us some email address so we can ask for information. But I would like to come to the three of you. The real world is different, right? And we had recently a webinar like this one now, Professor Sara, Dr. Issa, and Carlos, about food security and food crisis. The COVID, the pandemic, will bring so many bad results. And one of the results that we may face is the lack of food. People will have difficulty to get access to food, especially young people. They will be in a very, very big difficulty. So I'd like to hear your voice. We don't have too much time. Try to be concise. And how can we avoid food crisis in our days? And how the international organization can work together, even the private sector, as I mentioned before, to avoid starvation, to avoid a food crisis that can bring even other major problems. So If you can give this idea, I'll be very happy to hear. Professor Sara.
Very much. I think 2 weeks ago, the Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture actually addressed the impact of COVID on food security and sustainability in Africa. One of the things he said is that there is need for us to have strategic linkages with the farmers, with the government, and with the private sector to make sure that there's food security in Africa. There are companies that produce food like rice, like fufu, like plantain, etc. How do we, in the light of COVID, empower the farmers to be able to have this, to produce and sell their products out of their setting? So what is important first and foremost is that we need to facilitate and strengthen the ecosystems to promote stronger linkages and cooperation between the farmers, the private sector, the consumers for the demand and supply chain. We need to work on that alongside with FAO and maybe even WFP, because the WFP is distributing food, as we know, right now to some of these most affected areas where they cannot longer get food. Then again, what we've seen other governments doing is to actually get the foodstuffs and take it right to the door of the people that's providing foodstuff. Because when you speak about COVID and the lockdown, if COVID does not kill them, hunger will kill them. And because of hunger, many people brave it to go out of their the safety of their houses to do small businesses that will bring them money. So we should realize that as we are facing the health sector of COVID, we need also to look at the holistic dimension of the impact of COVID. Food security is one, potable water is one, energy is one, education, continuous education in this period is one. So for me, how can we avoid food crisis? We can avoid food crisis by empowering the farmers. We can avoid food crisis by making sure that there is production of food, and then the companies involved, the private sector involved in food production are also encouraged. Now, those who don't have money to buy, particularly those who don't have government jobs, because those who can afford to buy those foodstuffs are those who have government jobs. But what about the person who needs to take his or her product to the market and sell before getting money? And now we say no movement. No movement means that their products or their produce in the farms are getting rotten because they cannot bring them back to the city or to the farm where they can sell them. What is the government doing to assist and facilitate them to get these products to the market? So we need to think about business unusual and find a way to capacitate, empower them, empower them to bring this produce to the city. And one of them is to open a food center in some of these localities, in the village, in the rural areas. Then the government can send a vehicle to collect, and then they will pay the people by buying directly from the farm to the marketplace. So that is what I think we can do to avoid a food crisis. Then the cooperation between FAO, WFP, and the government in making sure that food production is ongoing. Because now, more than ever, we need cooperation and collaboration in all the sectors. We cannot do it alone. So we need to partner and really partner in the right way, in such a way that the weaker one can be lifted up by the stronger partner. So these are the ways that I feel that we can avoid food crisis in Africa in the light of COVID.
Thank you very much, Professor Sara. Now I come to you, Carlos, because something that Professor Sara mentioned is related, what you mentioned before, the combination of efforts, but also the engagement of international organizations to avoid the food crisis. And Professor Sara mentioned a holistic system. We need to combine this ecosystem, actually. How do you see the importance of international cooperation and the participation of international organization in the discussion of producing food and also to avoid a food crisis?
Yeah, first of all, let me apologize for this. I had a very bad connection. I got disconnected twice, and I can hear only part of what you're saying, so I hope you can hear me better. but I'm not having much luck with my connection. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I hear very well. We hear you very well.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, FAO has implemented an array of tools to support analysis and assessment of the impact of COVID-19 on food and agriculture, value chains, food prices, food security across the globe. The organization has been given special attention to the impact of the pandemic in the vulnerable populations and rural communities in food security. I mean, we all know that there is 820 million people undernourished in the world, meaning that they don't consume in the right and the right number and the right amount of calories for subsistence. At the same time, 135 million people across 55 countries and territories were estimated to be experiencing crisis level of acute food insecurity, according to the 2020 Global Crisis Report released in April. More than half of that, of the 135 million, which is 73 million, live in Africa, 43 million in the Middle East, 8.5 million in Latin America and the Caribbean. With this data, you can see that these most vulnerable people are located in the global South and South-South and Triangular Cooperation. I'm sorry, I always bring South-South and Triangular Cooperation because it's in my heart. It's providing solution, exchanging knowledge and technologies to support the most effective and most vulnerable people in this pandemic. International cooperation is more important than ever, and we must make efforts to scale up the solidarity among countries and support the most vulnerable populations in rural community. Let me add, for example, that we have recently changed the name, if you want, of our South-South cooperation program to include the T of Triangular Cooperation, where you incorporate the triangular partners, mostly the partners from the north, to join the South-South cooperation efforts, and this is having great results. FAO is taking concrete steps to face the pandemic as part of COVID-19 response. Some of these priorities, for example, is the support of countries to anticipate and mitigate the pandemic's impact on the population's food security and livelihood. Also to contribute the discussions on mitigating COVID-19 impact on global food trade and markets, both in the supply side as well as in the demand side. Support countries and research institutions in ongoing investigations to identify potential animal hosts of the virus and to reduce the spillover to humans. Also, we are rearranging or rethinking the way we do our humanitarian and resilience programming to ensure continued delivery assistance where there are already high levels of need that needs to be tackled immediately. We are improving data gathering and analysis to inform decision making, providing smallholder farmers and herders with seeds, tools, livestock feed, and other inputs, along with animal health support, so they can continue to produce food for their families and communities. We are distributing seeds and home gardening kits for food storage systems and poultry and other small stock to improve household nutrition. We are supporting the different ways in which we are rearranging the way we do business in order to comply with the current emergency, both at the current COVID stage and especially the post-COVID. Over to you.
All right. Thank you, my brother Carlos. Issa, I come to you with something that I'm very excited to ask you. Carlos mentioned one word, which is solidarity, right? So solidarity is important to continue the conversation, but also to the implementation of the policies, right? You are now seated in an office which is related to eradication of hunger. So you are fighting against hunger, which is not easy. You are fighting to avoid malnutrition in your center. How do you see practical evidences of implementation of eradication of hunger and avoiding malnutrition where you are located, but what perspective, positive perspective, optimist perspective that you can bring to the discussion?
Well, it's a challenging question, and let me start by saying that Carlos has given some great figures, and Professor Sarah as well has given some great insight on how we can avoid a food crisis. And I'm not going to come back on the numbers, on the figures, but forgive me if I'm quoting our executive director, David Beasley, who, looking at those figures, he warned that the COVID is a pandemic, a health pandemic, but the concern is that we risk falling into a hunger pandemic. I think this says it all, because it is about solidarity at different levels. Solidarity at international level, solidarity at national level, and at community level. 2 weeks ago, we had moderated a video conference with the ECOWAS and SEALs in West Africa. And the word solidarity was upfront, in the sense that if we wanted to avoid a food crisis, we need to make sure that we really are in this as a true partnership. At the international level, we need to simply avoid the bans that are being put in place because it disrupts all the supply chains. At the national level or sub-regional level, we need to coordinate our policy measures so that they don't contradict each other. And that was very, very clearly put. And also, we need to avoid the border closures as well. At the national level, as you know, the UN itself is supporting the governments, as well as the international financial institutions are supporting the government to implement the measures against the COVID. I think at that level, there are several measures that are being taken. One is to make sure that the humanitarian response, because there are many vulnerable people that are faced with conflict, with already heightened food insecurity and malnutrition in many places, and the COVID is just coming on top of it. And from that perspective, to maintain the social protection, or at least strengthen the social protection systems, to make sure that the humanitarian response that exists is being maintained and also strengthened, are some of the things that we can do at the national level to support the efforts that are being done by the government. Now, I think the COVID is also coming with new opportunities, because clearly with the e-commerce, all the digital opportunities that can be put in place to make sure that we are monitoring market, we are monitoring the food security situation through the new technologies, are all the things that can help us avert the food crisis. Now, to come to your question regarding what we are seeing, there are a lot of opportunities indeed that we are seeing in terms of good practices, and the center, CERFAM, is really here to document, to make those good practices known, the ones that really have a clear impact on food security and nutrition. Let me give an example. We are working on capturing the new technologies which are helping the reduction of post-harvest loss management. FAO has got a whole database on new technologies that are really improving the food security situation. At the CERFAM level, it's about identifying those ones and make sure that they are known, and make sure that the expertise that can implement it is made available to accompany the implementation at the local level. I gave that example. The other example that we are looking at, when you look at the education sector, there is a tremendous interest from government to make sure that there is homegrown school feeding built into the national policies. We are documenting those ones to make sure that a model that really shows that you can combine education with school feeding to make sure that kids are being fed at the same time learning is something that we are documenting. And those examples exist, especially in West Africa and Central Africa. In Chad, we are documenting something. We've been in touch with Benin and Togo to document something. And I think throughout Africa, those are some of the good examples that we want to document and make sure that they are being transferred as African solutions for Africans, if I may say so. Thank you very much.
Thanks, my brother Issa. You gave me so many ideas, and I hope we can have more time to discuss in a very appropriate way everything that you mentioned. Yes, Professor Sarah. You want?
Brother Dr. Sanogo mentioned the school feeding program, and of course we have the homegrown skill feeding program as a thematic cluster under the Continental Education Strategy for Africa, where more than 80% African Union member states are already participating in. We celebrate the African School Feeding Day, 1st of March every year. And many of the ministers have already integrated this in their school policies. And we've had examples, like we've seen, like in Zimbabwe, where a suburb school comes up with $100,000 every year from homegrown produce, just potatoes, sweet potato, tomatoes, carrots, etc. So I was just going to mention that that was a decision of the African Union Summit in 2017. They decided that the value of school feeding as a major tool to contribute to the goals of the Continental Education Strategy for Africa. It is only true that we can end zero hunger. I think the other thing is that when they held their meeting, the ministers of agriculture, under the mandate, under the leadership of the Commissioner for Rural Economy, they spoke about social protection. How can we achieve a balance? You know, they spoke about social protection, ensuring effective response and inclusive recovery in the context of COVID-19 in Africa. Then, you know, also, like he mentioned, crop calendars have been disrupted. So there were recommendation actions during the COVID-19 outbreak in Africa to work on the crop calendars. Then we also spoke about the measures for supporting domestic markets during the COVID-19 outbreak. That is the ministers of agriculture responding to the impact of COVID. And then they also said we should take advantage of the mechanism of the newly created African Continental Free Trade Area. Although with COVID and the lockdown, the free trade area itself is in quotes. Then we need to safeguard input supply chains for small-scale agricultural producers, like when he spoke about the small holder farmers, poultry and livestock in the context of COVID-19 in Africa. And we know that WFP has warned us about a hunger pandemic. And one of the data or statistics they gave us was that that over 800 million people face chronic undernourishment, and over 100 million people are in need of life-saving food assistance. So that topic that you brought up in this conversation is very, very important. We need to strengthen our humanitarian response and collaborate together so that we can form a greater force to respond to this. Because if COVID, like we normally say, a hungry man is an angry man. So if COVID does not kill, then the hunger crisis will kill many. And you know, when we say health is wealth because we are representative of the food we eat. It is the food we eat that makes us healthy. So the food security aspect of it, we cannot negotiate. We need to work on it, and faster. Thank you. I was just going to add that because it triggered me to remember some of these things.
No, I think my sister, your contribution was very timely, and I think everything that you mentioned is absolutely important, and you summarized many things that we included in this discussion. The school feeding program is a very important, let's say, platform, And I remember when the School Food program started here in Brazil through the Center of Excellence Against Hunger. And this was something that came to Africa. And I'm very pleased that the African Union deliberated to have a continental strategy and in some places. And I understand what Issa is doing now is the consequence, the result what we did started in Brazil, and through the guidance of our friend Daniel Balaban, and I'm very pleased the way that he's doing. And I know Cristiane is working with you, Issa, and they have a good potential to be implemented within Africa. I'm so sorry to say that our time is almost over. I wish I could stay here with you for 2 or 3, 4 more hours, but unfortunately, I know your agenda it doesn't allow us to stay. But before we go home or we close the conversation, I'd like to address to you one question, and you have only 2 minutes, no more than that, to answer. And I quote now our brother Nelson Mandela. He said that the youth of today are the leaders of tomorrow. I know you already had this quote from Mandela. If you have at the moment to address a big audience of young people, how can you stimulate? How can you give them the pride that they can be the future of tomorrow? How possible it will be for them listen your message that they will be leaders for tomorrow? You have 2 minutes to give the message. And now we have many young people listen to us. Please go direct.
To the youth in our audience, we want to tell you that the future belongs to you because you are our tomorrow's walking stick. You must keep on dreaming and you must work towards your dream. When the going gets tough, the tough gets going. And if anybody tells you that you are too small to make an impact, tell them that they are here to spend a night with a mosquito. Today is what you can see, but tomorrow, we say when there is hope, there is life. So never ever underestimate the power and the resources within you. When you are convinced about a project that you want to run with that project. It is not the money that is more important, but the strategic vision of that project is also very, very important. I believe that the youth have whatever it takes, particularly because when we speak about the future of work, we speak about digitalization. And we mentioned here, these are the Android generation. And the Android generation only needs space. If government can create space for the youth of Africa, empower them, and give them their capabilities, definitely they will be the youth of tomorrow. And for us, we will be able to achieve the transformation of the Africa we want. The youth power is very, very essential.
Thank you very much, Professor Sarah. Now you spoke as a professor, I know. Thank you very much. It's not the commission speak, but it's the Professor Sarah talk to the students. Thank you. Carlos, you have 2 minutes, no more than that, to give a message to young people. How possible it will be for them to be leaders of tomorrow?
Well, my message is really, really short. Rural youth and young people in general, the future of sustainable food systems. Yet around the world, few young people see a future for themselves in agriculture in rural areas. It is our duty right now to create an enabling environment to make this environment in the rural areas attractive to young people. This is what we have to work on. But you are the future. There is no doubt about that. Very simple message.
Very simple and straight. Very, very precise. Thank you, my brother Carlos. And now the ball is in your field, Issa.
Professor João, you mentioned Nelson Mandela. If you allow me, I will quote Gracia Marshall. She said, even though our youth have the potential to transform Africa, if neglected, they could exacerbate poverty and inequality while frightening peace, security, and prosperity. I think with that quote, we must be proactive and ensure that we meet the needs of the youth, because the youth and women are the backbone of sustainable development goals, the aspiration of the Africa Agenda 2063, and the youth are the backbone of peace, security, and prosperity. Thank you.
Very, very good. Now it's really the moment that we need to conclude, and I'd like to thank you very much for your patience and for your participation. I'd like to thank you again, my dear sister, Professor Sarah Agbor, the Commissioner for Human Resources and Science and Technology for the African Union Commission. Thank you very much. Your voice is always very welcome, and listen, your guidance is important for us. Dr. Issa Sanogo, Director of the Regional Center for the World Food Program Against Hunger and Malnutrition in Côte d'Ivoire, and also my friend Carlos Watson. He's the former Senior Coordinator of this Office of South-South and Triangular Cooperation, so you need to include the T. For me, I'm very glad that we had this conversation. I learned too much, and I'd like to emphasize the participation of a big audience that we have in our channel on YouTube. And this video will be available, so if you want to hear again what my guests gave here in terms of guidance and also good practices, please go to Brazil-Africa Institute YouTube channel and listen and share with other people. Please, let's continue this moment of COVID. Let's be alert. The situation is not easy, but I understand that the discussion that we had today was a good contribution for us to understand what is coming next. Once again, thank you very much, and I hope I can see you again soon in one of our webinars organized by the Brazil-Africa Institute. My grateful appreciation for your participation. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure, colleagues.